Aiden Robert was born October 23rd, 2009. He was a week late, sorry. He was a week late. I tried castor oil previously. It would start labor, but it wouldn't go anywhere. I would just have really strong contractions and not make any cervical progress. So what I ended up doing was he was born on a Friday. And what I did was, I believe that Wednesday, late afternoon, I went into my chiropractor, got an adjustment, and got acupuncture. Went home, waited 24 hours, nothing had happened yet, and then the morning of the day he was born, the Friday, my water broke. I woke up at 5 and just kind of felt like a leak, and so I woke up my husband and I said, honey, I think my water broke. And he's like, well, what do we do? And I said, I don't know, I'm going to go to the bathroom. So I got up, walked to the bathroom, could kind of see the consistency, and I touched it because I wanted to see if it was my water, not urine. It definitely had a different consistency and look to it than urine did. Sorry, this is TMI. So went back to the bedroom, changed my undergarments, and said, yeah, it's my water, it's coming out, you know, in little bits, and called my great aunt, who has always been like a mother to me. She had previously agreed to help in the delivery of my son. So I called and told her. She said, okay, great, call the midwife. Called the midwife. We went into the birth center. Long story short, they have like these strips that they use to test and see if like your fluid, if it's actually amniotic fluid. And she had tested like 3 different strips, and all of them weren't changing the color that would indicate that it was amniotic fluid. And she said, you know, it might just be urine. You know, I'm not getting a result here. And I was like, listen, lady, I'm telling you, it's coming in spurts. It's not continuous. It's not urine. I know what it would feel like if it was urine. So she said, she gave me a little bag of the strips, and she said, okay, well, here, take some home and test, and if you get it to turn this color, call and let me know. So I felt a little gush again, and I said, oh wait, I just leaked some. Let me have one of those strips. So I took a strip and I put it right up against my pad, and it changed the color, and she looked shocked. And so she said, okay, well, are you having contractions? And I said, no, not yet. We went back home, we waited. At 10 a.m. my contractions started. I had been doing laundry and dishes and just trying to make sure like all the last little bit of the stuff for the house was ready. My contractions came on strong and heavy and painful, and they lasted they were about 4 minutes apart to start, and then within an hour they were like 3 minutes. And my other aunt came to visit me, and she said, you look like you're in transition, because I was squatting and walking with my contractions. And so Roberta, my great aunt, she said, okay, well, let's go see the midwife and see what we're doing. So we had called the midwife, and they wanted to talk to me through contractions, and I wanted a silent birth. I don't want a lot of unnecessary communication, words, emotions, anything like that. So you know, I would pause. I told her I have a contraction's coming, and I would pause, and then she said, okay, why don't you come in and we'll check you. And I was at 1.5 for a couple of weeks prior to going into labor, and I hadn't even dilated a full 1/2 centimeter. She told me I did just to kind of keep my spirits up, but in actuality I hadn't, and she told me this later. So she said, okay, well, why don't you go outside. The birth center was right on the water, pretty secluded. There weren't like busy traffic or anything like that. It was like a neighborhood. So she said, why don't you go and walk for an hour, and then I'll check you again. So by this time I had started to vomit with my contractions, which is weird because I didn't vomit with morning labor. I think I vomited twice in my first trimester. But I was vomiting between every few contractions, and my midwife had given me like this little cotton swab in a small cup, and I would smell it, and it would somewhat help with the nausea, but I didn't fully handle it. And I can recall walking and like having to brace myself onto a tree when a contraction was coming, because they were really, 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 really strong, and I was having a lot of pain in my lower back, like in my hips. So we walked, squatted, did everything we were supposed to do for an hour. At about 2:30, she checked me again, and I still hadn't made any progress. And by this time, it was 8 hours since my water had broken. And she said, why don't you go and see a chiropractor or an acupuncturist? So we went to the chiropractor. That's actually a family friend of ours. He's not far from the birth center. We called and let him know what was happening. First we went home so I could shower because I'd vomit all over. And I showered and vomited again and rested, and finally went to see Dr. Cooper, I want to say 4 o'clock. Got an adjustment. I don't remember the adjustment being painful. I mean, the contractions were painful. The adjustment didn't make it any worse. It did help a bit with the back pain that I was having. He worked on the same pressure points that I had the acupuncture on 2 days before, and we went back home. I tried to rest. By this time I was so tired. I remember I was falling asleep between every contraction, which isn't very long. It's like 45 minutes or 45 seconds, and I got into the tub and I made it as hot as I could stand it, and I just laid there with on my side with half of my belly in the water, again dozing off between every contraction. And my husband came in and he said, "Honey, you can't fall asleep. You're in the tub." I was like, I'll be fine. I'm tired. I'm just sleeping between the contractions." And he was really worried that, I don't know, I was going to fall asleep and roll over into the water. So at this point, they were really, 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 really strong. And I was starting to get exhausted and feeling defeated. And I said to him, all emotional and tired and in labor, I said, "I don't know how much longer I can do this. I want to go to the birth center and get checked, and if I'm not dilated, then we're going to have to go to the hospital, and they're going to put me on Pitocin, and then I'm going to have to get an epidural, and blah, 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 blah," and my craziness. And he said, "Okay, honey, I'm going to go get Aunt Berta." So he went and got Roberta, and they helped me get out of the tub and get together, and realized it takes a while for me to get from one place to another because of the frequency of the contractions. So we finally get into the car. We get to the birth center. I want to say it's like probably 7 or so. She texts me and she says, "You're 6 centimeters." And I just remember feeling like this weight of relief. Like, yes, it's working. All this pain isn't for nothing. And I took my dress off and had another contraction, squatted down on the floor, had a couple more on the way to the tub that she'd been filling up, got into the tub, and I just remember this feeling just this. I mean, I could still feel the pain, but it was definitely not as severe, and it didn't feel overwhelming anymore. I think too, knowing that it was actually doing what it was supposed to do made me feel better. So at this point I kind of lost track of time. I remember starting to feel this tightening in my stomach, and I had rectal pressure on the way to the birth center, and that's I think what made me, when I was in the tub, go, "We need to go get looked at." So at this point I'm in the tub, and I start to feel intense pressure, and my stomach is just kind of bearing down on its own. I'm pushing without trying to push. And I remember the midwife telling me, "Blow like you're blowing out candles," and I'm sitting there trying to not push until she can check me and check the heart rate and everything. And so she checked me, and there was what do they call it, a lip or a rim or whatever, and she just kind of held it out of the way for a minute, and then I started to push. And I remember in pushing just feeling exterior to myself.